In this video, we're going to take a closer look at how to filter data in QGIS. It can be really useful to know how filters work and how to write expressions. So the first thing I'm going to do in my blank QGIS project is add the world as a background, because the layer I'm going to filter is populated places and I just want to be able to see the countries in the background. So I'll go to the bottom of QGIS and in the coordinate box I'll select the text, I'll type in world in lowercase and then I'll hit enter. So you can see I typed world, I hit enter, and then we get countries. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the populated places file. It's a CSV file, so it's just a text file. You could do this yourself with any layer you like. It doesn't matter what format it's in. If you do want to follow along with me though, you can find the link to this file in the description for the video. To add that file, I click on this button, which is the Data Source Manager button, and I make sure I am in delimited text. Now, I'm in delimited text here because the layer I'm adding is a CSV file. If you were adding a geopackage or a shapefile, for example, or a GeoJSON, you could do it in vector, but in this case it's a CSV file. I just need to browse to where the file is saved, so I'll do that. And here's the folder where I put that CSV file. Again, the link to this file is in the description if you want to follow along. So I select it and I click open. And in file format, I can see it's a CSV file. In record and field options, you shouldn't need to change anything here. But make sure in geometry definition, make sure it says point coordinates. Now, a couple of things to be wary of here. QGIS should recognize that the X field is longitude and the Y field is latitude. I'm just going to scroll along until I can see latitude and longitude. Okay, that looks fine. The key thing here though, these are in decimal degrees, so it's the global coordinate reference system. So the geometry CRS section here, it should be this one that says EPSG 4326. If for any reason that is not what yours says, you can click on the little button at the end to change the CRS. The easiest way to find it if it wasn't there is click the button and in the filter box type 4326 and then you would see the coordinate reference system. So all coordinate reference systems have these codes. It's often easy to remember the codes. Okay, cancel that. Now when I click add, what we should see is loads of dots across the world. And these are populated places across the world. So let's add that and click close. If you did that and they're looking really weird, sometimes that's because the X field and Y field get flipped around. If that happens, you just remove the layer and do it again. But it's all fine. So the first thing I usually do when I add data is I like to see how many points I have, or how many features, or how many polygons. A really easy way to do that is right click on the layer once you've selected it and hit show feature count. So now I know there's 7,332 points in this layer. What I'll usually do next is I'll open the attribute table for the layer. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can right click and hit open attribute table, or you can go to the toolbars and click open attribute table. You should see the shortcut on your system, and mine it's F6. So I'll open the table, and just so you notice, you can also see the number of features in the table at the top, and it will also tell you how many are filtered, so how many are showing. In this file, what we can see is all the columns in our data set. So for each point, we've got lots of different information. And it tells us what country it's in, it tells us latitude, longitude. It's got some population data, but I'm not absolutely certain how accurate that is in the present day. We've got lots of other variables, many of which are zero. We've got time zones and all sorts of other things. And because of that, it means we can filter in a variety of ways. And we also have the city names in loads of different languages. Okay, so let's close that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to filter the populated places to show only those places in a certain country. So to do that, I can right click and hit filter. Now the key thing here is when you're doing this, you need to remember which column the country names or codes are in. So usually what happens is you open up the query builder after right clicking on filter and you've forgotten that. So one thing that might be useful is if you open the attribute table again via a right click and open attribute table, you can click this button which will dock the attribute table at the bottom. And what I would usually do is if you scroll along, you can see in the add ADM 0 name column, we do have an indication of countries. So that looks fine. Sometimes we'll also see country code here, SOV A3 column. We've also got SOV 0 name column. I think in that one though, sometimes it maybe includes things that aren't necessarily independent countries at times. I think it's got some other territories. But let's just take ADM 0 name as the column we want to filter on. So I'll right click on that and I'll go to filter. And the reason I like to have the table open like that sometimes is just so I can see my fields. So I know here I want to do ADM 0 name. So I'll double click it and then I'll hit equals. And then I'm going to hit all. And if you don't get anything appearing when you hit all, make sure you've got ADM 0 name selected. And this lists all the possible values in that column. So let's filter it so that we're showing only those points in Bangladesh. So the query here, I just double clicked on Bangladesh and it goes down here. I usually do that via a double click rather than typing in. If I type in, I'm more prone to making a mistake. What I would usually do is I'd hit the test button to make sure I've got it right. And then QGIS will tell me how many features it finds. In this case, it tells us there's 16 rows. So what that means is this data set's got 16 points in Bangladesh. So let's click OK and OK. And then if we hit this button, zoom to layer, because we've filtered the layer, it's going to zoom to those filter places. Okay, great. If I right click the layer and hit show labels, we can see some labels, but let's just see what labels it's used. If I double click the layer, what I can see in labels is it's labeled those places via the name column. So that's fine. It will usually choose the name column if there's a name column. So that's okay. I am going to do one other thing here though. In labels and then in rendering, a useful tip for you here, labels and then rendering. I don't want the labels to come on all the time. Like when I'm zoomed out at the world level, I don't want the labels to appear. So I'm going to click scale dependent visibility. And at the moment, if I look at the bottom of my screen in the scale section, so to the right of the coordinate box at the bottom of the QGIS window, the scale is like 1 to 3.2 million. So let's choose 1. If I choose 1 to a million and then click apply, the labels will disappear. So let's choose 1 to 5 million. So that's the minimum scale at which the labels will come on. So if I hit apply, they'll come back on. And if I hit OK and then zoom out a little bit, the labels only come on when I'm zoomed in far enough. So let's say we've filtered for places in Bangladesh, but what if we also want labels for places in India? We've used equals, we'll get to in a second, because we've got one place. If we want to filter for more than one, we can use in, and then I can open the bracket, and then after Bangladesh, exactly as it is, with the single quotes around it, I put in a comma. Now what I want to do is I want to select the ADM 0 name column again and list all the countries. But if I hit all, only Bangladesh shows up. That's because we've already filtered the layer. So this box here is a bit mysterious. It says use unfiltered layer. And what that does is if we've got this selected, we have already filtered the layer, so only Bangladesh shows up here. But if I click all now, because we ticked that box to use the unfiltered layer, it lists all possible countries in that column. the ADM0 name column. So now I can just search for India. Now I could just type in India surrounded by single quotes, but again, I like to do this to avoid typos. I'll just double click India. The benefit of that is it also includes the single quotes. I'll end with a close bracket. I'll click test and then OK and OK. So now in the layer it tells us there's 230 places. If I zoom out, the labels go off. If I zoom in, the labels come on. And within, you can repeat this as many times as you like. I will type in one here. Let's choose another country. Australia. I'll always hit test to make sure I've done it right. Yep, 454. Click OK. OK. I'll zoom to the layer because it's now going to zoom to the extent of those layers. So the key thing there is if you're just filtering for one country, you can use equals. If you are filtering for more than one in the same column, you can use in, and then it's just a comma separated list with brackets around it. So now we can get a little bit more fancy. So for example, we can combine things. If I put a not before the query and click test and then OK, what it does is it shows everywhere that's not Bangladesh, India or Australia. So it's kind of like the reverse, but I'll delete that for now. And I'll hit OK. Let's clear this query and click on OK. So the power of filters is being able to go from a very messy data set to one that's more meaningful and useful to you. It is often useful to have all the data included, but we don't always want to show it all. Now we do have, like I said, a population column, and our population column is called Pop Max. And as you can see, it's got a population field for different cities. I'm not entirely sure the source of this, but that's not important right now. The important thing is that we have a number we can filter by. So let's have a little think about this. We've got a column called cap in. Now that tells us whether something's a capital or what kind of capital city it is. We've also got a column which tells us the latitude and longitude. We've mentioned that before. So let's filter by population and by country. And let's move to the United States for this. So if I right click and choose filter and do what we did before, ADM0 name equals, I'll hit all, and here I'll search for United States. There we go, double click that, click OK. And we still have 769 places, so that's quite a lot, too many to have on the map at the moment. So I'll usually want to use another filter. So I'll click the little filter icon here, and what we're going to do is add another criteria, and we'll hit the and button to do that. So we're searching for everywhere that is called the United States of America that's in the ADM0 name column, and pop max more than or equal to 500,000. This data is not necessarily exactly right in relation to metropolitan populations, but that's not the issue right now. The key thing is knowing how to combine different things in a filter expression. If I test this and hit OK, we get down to 93. Let's choose more than 1 million. And I'm just typing in 1 million there. Hit test. OK, it returns 50. Click OK and OK. And then we can zoom in and see different places. So this is probably a mix of official boundaries and metro populations. Okay, so that's a combination of two different columns. Let's say we were just interested in something completely random, like every place that's got an X in the name. Well, let's do something different there. Let's clear this. And the name has the name of the city in it. If I double click on name and then hit like, I can do single quote, %, X, %, a single quote. Now what that does is the like tool, the like operator, will look for any text that's like an X. So if it's an X anywhere in the name, it will show the city. So if I click test, and we've got 86, let's click OK and OK. And if I double click the layer on the left and turn off scale dependent visibility so that the labels come on at any scale, we can see what we've got. We've got Halifax, Nova Scotia, Knoxville, Tennessee, but I can zoom around the world. We should have Oxford, Exeter, Luxembourg, Auxerre, and so on. If I take away the % from the end, so the % after the X, what that's going to do is it's only going to show those places that end in X, because the % is a kind of wild card. And if we take away the % at the X, the % at the end, it should only show places now that end in X. So if I click test, you will see that. So Tunisia, we have Sfax, or Bordeaux in France, and other places. If I take the % away from the start, before the X, and put it after, if I hit test, we get 0. Let's try it with a capital X. And there's 32. So you can see in this case, like is case sensitive. You will find sometimes with different types of data, maybe a geo package, it's not necessarily case sensitive. If I try I like, let me try that, and I hit test, it returns 32. If I do a lowercase x here and hit test, we also get 32. So you can see I like in this case means that is not case sensitive. So here we're finding everywhere that starts with an X. If we wanted to find, say, everywhere with an X in it and everywhere with a Q in it, we could, I'll just copy this. Let me just use like again. So if I copy that and hit R and then paste that, and I put a Q here and a % around it. So if you want to start, say for example, you've got a messy data set and you're looking for things with certain characters in them, you could do this, and this is going to find anywhere with a X in it or a Q in it. Let me hit test. Okay. And let me hit test again. So 217 places. If I change the or to an and hit test, what does this do? It should show only places with an X and a Q in it. So if I click OK and OK, then we should, we have 3 places. The table seems to have made them disappear, but let me turn on the table again. Yeah, we've got 3 places that show up. Let's filter again. If we want to filter to show only places, say in the northern hemisphere, we do have latitude, so I could click on, double click latitude, greater than or equal to 0 will get us everywhere from the equator northwards. And if I change it to less than or equal to, it will get us the southern hemisphere. If I want to find the biggest places in the southern hemisphere, I would say latitude less than or equal to 0 and population max. Oops, let me just correct that. And population max more than 5 million. Test that. There we go. So there's loads of different things you can do with filters. You can go from a big mess of data to something really useful quite quickly. What else here? That's probably enough for now. Just remember that it's probably quite useful to, instead of typing things in, the reason, like I said before, I'll clear this. The reason I don't type things in is it's easy to make a mistake, but also if I double click ADM0 name, which is one of the columns, it already puts the double quotes around it. If I hit equals and then all here, let me do Congo. So here we're going to filter by Congo, the country with the capital of Kinshasa. I'll test that. There's 88 rows there. So we'll use an and we'll add in a population variable, pop max more than 500,000. I'll test that. There we go. Okay. And then we can zoom to the layer. So hopefully if you've ever been confused or wondering about how filtering works and you don't really know how to put it together, that has helped you. Just remember that one little extra tip is once you've filtered it and you go back to filter the same column, if you hit all, it's only going to list the ones that have already been filtered. So in this case, we're only seeing Congo. To make sure we get the list of all countries, once more, you would just tick the use unfiltered layer box. Now when I hit all, we get all countries again. So hopefully you will find that useful and you'll be able to apply it in your own work.